that the city has partaken in as well as engaged one of our consultants, Mr. Eric Chatham. He has been working with the city for over 10 years, and so he says committed to work with us for the next 5 years in creating, strategizing, and planning for our federal funds that the city receives. We are an entitlement participation jurisdiction of funds coming in from HUD, and so we want to give you all, our citizens, an opportunity to learn more about the information that we've got prepared from data that we pull. It allows you the opportunity to ask questions, provide feedback on what you'd like to see in terms of the city, how we are to move forward, utilizing, capitalizing, leveraging our federal dollars in terms of with other funding opportunities from the city as well as from the state. Okay, so I will not hold you any further. I'm going to turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Again, Eric Chatham with Civitas. So again, tonight we're hoping to get your feedback on what the city's priorities should be for these 3 different federal grants that we receive each year. So I've got a brief presentation where I'm going to kind of explain what this plan entails and these 3 grants that we receive and how the city has used them in the past and what's eligible, and then hopefully get your feedback. At the same time of doing this 5-year plan, we're also doing another required plan for HUD called a fair housing assessment. So it also going to introduce that plan and those efforts here towards the end of the presentation, and would like your feedback on fair housing issues here in Columbia as well. So as Felicia said, the city receives 3 different grants each year from HUD. The oldest one being the Community Development Block Grant. It's our most flexible and our largest grant. I'll give you a little more details about that in a moment. But that grant, we've been receiving that grant for 50 years now. We're in our 50th year. This plan starts our 51st year of receiving it. Cities received it since day one when Congress allocated these funds 50 years ago. These funds are subject to Congress passing a budget every year and continuing to fund them, but for 50 years now, that hasn't been an issue. Certainly we're paying attention to the current goings on in Washington, but we don't really feel like these programs are going to be eliminated. They might be modified, might be changed, might have a little reduction in funding in the next few years, but we don't really have much concern for them being canceled because so many communities around the country receive them. But the primary effort or purpose of these funds is to provide for housing and community development needs for low to moderate income individuals and households and low income neighborhoods here in Columbia and of course around the country. For a little bit of context, Richland County receives these funds as well. Lexington County receives these funds as well. The state receives these funds. Around the state, Charleston County, Greenville, Spartanburg. So other communities around the state that are similar size or larger than Columbia also receive these funds and go through similar efforts, just for your information. So we use these funds specifically here in Columbia. One of our grants does allow us to serve a larger area here in the Midlands, and I'll get to that program in just a second. So again, we have the 3 grants. The top left here is our Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG. This is the oldest grant. The city receives about $1 million a year in those funds. Again, we're waiting on the 2025 budget, so we don't know what we're going to get next year just yet. But this is our most flexible or broadest use category. So the city has, in years past, had a pretty robust housing rehab program, where we help homeowners make repairs to their home so that they can continue to live safely in their home. The city uses some of these funds in the past to help people purchase homes, so down payment assistance, purchase assistance, mortgage programs. We fund several nonprofits to run different social service type programs. The CDBG refers to that as public services. That's a pretty big program. We can use 15% of the funds each year for those public services. City also uses these funds for public facilities and infrastructure improvement, and that's a really flexible or broad category, but we can do things like improving community centers like this one, parks, libraries, senior centers, sidewalk improvements, these sort of things, lighting. There's a project ongoing now where we're improving some lighting around the park so residents can safely move about and access the park amenities. So that's the biggest category, if you will, and the most, where most of the funding goes is the public facilities and infrastructure, followed by housing. And then the city can use up to 20% of the funds to cover running the program. And we use the CDBG admin funding to also support the other 2 programs. From time to time in the past, the city has used some of the funds to help small businesses expand or grow or get started up, helping potentially low-income individuals start their own business or other businesses to expand and provide employment opportunities in Columbia. We have done that from time to time. That's not an ongoing standard program, but certainly an eligible use. The home program is our next grant. That is, as the name indicates, all things housing. Typically, the city is using that to work with for-profit and nonprofit housing developers to build affordable housing. I understand there's an organization in the room, TN, that's getting funding to build new affordable housing. So some of those are for home ownership, so they build them and then sell them. And then in that case, the city is able to help those buyers with mortgage or down payment assistance. Other cases, we work with, again, for-profit and nonprofit developers to build rental housing, and then they maintain and operate those as affordable rentals, typically for at least 20 years. So there's stipulations that they maintain those pretty long-term in those cases. And then the third grant is a very specific grant, the HOPWA grant, or Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS and HIV. City works with several nonprofits in the Midlands here. We do serve a larger area than just the city with this grant, because in the state receives these funds, and then nobody else but Columbia receives these funds in the state. So we cover a little bit larger area here in the Midlands, and then the state covers the balance with HOPWA. Those funds are typically used for rent, mortgage, or utility assistance for households where at least one member of the household has been diagnosed with HIV or AIDS. It's mostly for rental assistance and utility assistance, but there's also a component for supportive services or social service type programs that those same agencies provide to those clients. So that's a very prescribed or very restrictive fund, if you will. Only a few agencies, of course, in the area focused on that type of programming, and the city typically funds those agencies with the entire grant. So you can see right here on the screen, in the bottom left, our 2024 allocation. So this is what we have in the current year at CDBG. Again, just over $1 million. Home, $700,000. And then the HOPWA, again, we serve a little bit larger area, but that's just a little less than $2 million to serve that area for those 3 grants. So this plan we're working on, what HUD tells us, the regulations require us to do, is every 5 years, essentially take a pause in the program, get feedback from the community, get feedback from nonprofits and developers and other stakeholders, city council members, neighborhood presidents, get all the feedback we can. My team's helping the city do some demographic analysis, some housing analysis, and of course, city has staff that's running these programs and is on the ground seeing this every day. So we take all that feedback, that data, staff's understanding of the programs and community needs, and we create this consolidated plan. So you see the main sections here. The needs assessment, this is what my team's currently doing, where we're doing sort of demographic analysis of the community. The market analysis is what it sounds like, housing market analysis. My team, again, is helping with that piece. And then we're going to develop, when we get all this feedback, we're going to develop the strategic plan. And this is really where we want your feedback. The strategic plan says, okay, well, where all these things are potentially eligible uses of the funds, city can't fund everything. We don't have that kind of money, right? So with the limited money, but many options to use and many needs, we're not going to serve all the needs. How do we prioritize where the money goes? Is it housing? Is it homelessness? Is it services? Is it more parks? Is it more transportation, infrastructure, economic development? What should our priority be? And so when we develop that strategic plan, that establishes what the city will do for the next 5 years. So hypothetically, if we say, well, we only want to do all things housing, we don't want to do any economic development. even though that might be eligible under the program, if we don't identify it as a priority, we essentially can't fund it for that 5-year period. Now, of course, we can amend the plan and go through this effort, in 2 years if we say, hey, we messed up, we got to do something different. But that requires us to go through all this process again. So ideally, we get the appropriate feedback, have the appropriate deliberations and planning, and have a good plan that we can stick with for the 5 years. So we're seeking your feedback on those priorities for the next 5 years. Where should the money go? And then staff will work to implement those programs, design those programs, and fund agencies that help deliver those programs. Every year then, in that 5-year period that this plan will cover, we have what's called our annual action plan. So when Congress passed the budget, gives us a particular allocation for the year, we go back and create a budget for that year's money, where we identify specific things or specific agencies, specific parks that are going to be funded with that year's allocation. And then the final component, which thank you for being here tonight, you're obviously engaged in, is the citizen participation and feedback throughout this process. So as you're obviously aware, you're here, we've got 4 of these evening community meetings. We've got another virtual stakeholder meeting during the business day, one day next week. Then we'll be doing interviews and meetings with city council members and city staff and other departments to get all this feedback. Then we'll work on the plan for the next several months, and then in the early spring, we'll come back to you guys. We'll notify you that we have a draft plan. We'll put it out for comment period, and we'll appreciate you to take a look and provide feedback. Did we hear what you said? And put that into the plan. Eventually, then we'll host a public hearing. It'll go through council approval, so there'll be multiple opportunities in the spring to look at the finalized plan and continue to provide feedback before we submit the HUD early next summer, late spring. And then we get these next round of funds, ideally, if Congress passes the budget, around July 1st of next year. Okay? So I kind of went through this process, but what we're doing now is developing this plan. My team's doing all, sort of the research piece. Staff is helping with the community outreach and the surveys and the citizen feedback. I'm going to share with you, if you haven't already seen it, we have an online survey. At the end, I'll show you a little QR code you can scan with your phone and take that survey. We can get surveys to you and for your neighbors to share with. I know we've got a couple of neighborhood presidents. We can get paper surveys if that's more helpful. The survey is available in English and Spanish right away, and we can get it translated to other languages if there's a need for that as well. So any way we can get feedback, we'll take emails, we'll take letters, we'll take survey responses, any way we can get feedback, we appreciate that. And then again, so we developed this plan over the winter, if you will, put it out for comment in the early spring, then submit to HUD. When they approve or accept our plan, then they've authorized the funding starting in July of next year. Now, that being said, we do have current grants, so the programs are running now from previously funded, so it's not to say we don't have any money right now. We're running programs are active now, so we're really just setting the plans for next 5 years of money. We've already done this 5 years ago and 10 years ago. Okay, so I want to share with you just some of the just to kind of get your mind around this, some of the data that we've already started pulling around the population growth. How many of you are from, obviously you all live in Columbia. Who's lived here the longest? Not me, I live in Mount Pleasant. I've been in 20 years. How long have you, forever?
Yeah.
How long is that, if you don't mind me asking, how long is that? 40 years?
66.
60. Okay, so you guys have seen the growth and the changes here in the Midlands. So I grew up in Atlanta. I've been in South Carolina for 20 years, certainly all over the state. We've seen tremendous population growth, but that's had impacts on housing, on infrastructure. You guys are right here in the heart of the state. You see that the infrastructure and the traffic probably worse than anybody with everything flowing right through here in the Midlands. But just some simple statistics here. Population, now we're using census information, so this is a little bit old because it's using census information from last year. And so the population is a little bit higher. If you had an ability to actually count today, it's probably higher. But over the last decade, we've seen about a 5.5% increase in the population. But what I want to point out to you, the total households has increased by 10%. So we're up to over 50,000 households here. As a housing market analyst, when I see the population goes up by 5, but the number of households goes up by 10%, that tells me the household size is getting smaller. So right now, our average household size is just over 2 people. When you think about your household, how many people are in it? Well, there's 2 people in my household. I don't know how many are in yours. But so our household size is shrinking. So as a housing market analyst, I'm looking at that going, hey, there are needs for 3, 4, 5-bedroom households. Yes, there are still families that need that size. But if most of our households are 2 or 1 people, we need to appropriate housing stock for our households, right? And be planning for what household sizes will look like in the future. So we're looking at the housing stock and what the housing that we're developing with these funds to make sure it's suitable for the households that are here in Columbia and what we anticipate in the future. And we don't anticipate big families, with 5, 6, 7-bedroom houses. That's not what we need. We need more efficient, smaller 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom type houses that are efficient, affordable, and effective for a lot of us. Median income has up to 54,000. So just clarify, we do not use average income. Median is what HUD uses. Median means half the households make more, half the households make less. Okay, that's just right down the middle. So the median income is currently just over 54,000. That looks like a huge increase, 33% increase in the last decade. I'm going to show you in a couple of slides, housing costs have gone up by 40 or 50%. So 30% increase in incomes in the last decade. Go. Not if everything else went up by 40 or 50%. We're not keeping up. So that's a pretty good income increase, but it's not keeping up with housing costs, and that's really problematic. So our programs, as I said in the introduction, are ideally designed to primarily benefit low to moderate income. That does not necessarily mean this is all for homeless or poverty level households. Our programs can serve up to 80% of that median income. So I showed you a median income about 54,000. So here on the screen there, we adjust it for household size. But a household of 4 in Columbia at 80% AMI could earn almost $70,000 a year and still be eligible for some of the programming. Of course, we have programs that are for very low income and homeless households, understanding. But a lot of our programs, like the rehab program, the mortgage assistance program, this is not necessarily for extremely low income or poverty level household. It is for low to moderate income. We want to stress that. I know affordable housing gets a bad rap a lot of times. We're not talking about poverty households at all times. $70,000 for a household of 4 is a pretty healthy income. I don't care where you live. Okay? We have made improvements across the city, but poverty level has actually increased just slightly in the city, while at the state level, poverty has gone down. So that is one negative, if you will. Poverty has gone up just slightly, but everywhere else is seeing improvements in poverty levels. So that's certainly something that we have to keep in mind. Incomes are on the rise, household costs are on the rise, but our poverty rates are not improving over the last decade. So certainly something we consider in these programs. Here's the big one for me, is the cost of housing, and I know you're familiar with this. So on the top there, we show the median home value. Median home value in 2022 was just over $226,000. That's an increase over the last decade of 40%. That's not to say that if you went out and tried to buy a house today, you'd find a whole bunch of houses listed for $225,000. The median value includes all the households. So mobile homes and old and nasty houses that should be torn down, they're part of that value. So are the high-end houses on part of that value too, right? But that's not what, per se, you could go buy one today. That's not necessarily what we're trying to say. But the median value, meaning again, half are worth more, half are worth less, is $225,000. Look at the rent. The median rent now is up to $913. So half of our renters are paying more, half are paying less, but that's a 45% increase. So again, when incomes are going up by 30%, but home costs are going up by 40, rents are going up by 45, we're way behind. We're not keeping up. And naturally, people can't afford the housing that they're in. So HUD uses this term called cost burden. If you pay more than 30% of your income towards housing costs, you're considered to be cost burden. If you pay more than 50% of your income towards housing, you're considered to be severely cost burden. Okay, so on this screen we're showing the homeowners. So 20% of all of our current homeowners pay more than 30% of their income towards housing costs. Now that includes mortgage, insurance, taxes, etc., right? So that's all things involved there. 12% of all of our homeowners are paying between 30 and 50% of their income, and we have 7.5 or 7.7% of our homeowners paying more than half of their income towards their housing costs. And these are people that already own their house, right? I mean, they may still have a mortgage, but they can't afford the home that they live in. So that really supports the fact that for our low-income homeowners, they're not going to have the ability to renovate their home, put a new roof on their home, fix the windows, fix insulation, etc., when those homes need those kinds of massive repairs. So that really supports the city's robust housing rehab program. Otherwise, these households are not going to be able to keep up with their home. Home is going to deteriorate to a situation where it's not livable. And where are they going to go at that point? Well, they're going to go to a rental property that's even more expensive and cost burden for them. So one of our ways of addressing cost burden is to help the people that are in a house and reasonably afford it stay in that house as long as possible and as long as feasible for their conditions. It's significantly worse on the renter side. So over 50% of all of our renters are paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. And we've got over 28% paying more than half of their income towards rent. So if I could put real simple terms, a third of all of our renters, this is not low-income renters, this is all renters. A third of all of our renters are paying more than half of their income towards housing. These households are at significant risk. Any little hiccup in their income, any little hiccup, and have a health issue, kids gotta, be in the hospital, somebody's gotta be in the hospital or has some sort of a medical emergency, you got a car breakdown, somebody loses a job or even has a temporary layoff at a job, you miss one payment, you're at risk of becoming homeless. Households at this level paying that kind of income or that kind of portion of their income towards rent have no ability to save for potentially becoming a homeowner. So yes, the city's got a really good mortgage assistance and purchase program. These renters don't have a shot at even being ready for that. They don't have any money to save for a down payment. The city is really generous in those programs, but it can't do it 100%. You got to come to the table with some of your own money. And that's really hard for these renters. And so these renters are going to be heavily reliant on other social service programs. And this is not a slight on those residents, but that has a cost for the rest of the residents in the city. These programs have to exist, have to be maintained, have to be funded, because we have such a high percentage of our renters at such significant risk. They're right on the margin, one issue the wrong way, and they're going to be in need of services. So the lack of affordable housing really ripples through the community. The other way it impacts is these households don't have any discretionary funds. So they're not out in the community going to the movies, going to dinner, going shopping, spending money to stimulate the local economy, which is ultimately what we all need, right? How do we have jobs and run our own business? We all need to be active in the economy. And in these households, you can't do that. So that it's really ripples through the community when we don't have the lack of affordable housing, because we all have to support the households that can't afford where they're living. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox a little bit about affordable housing. But in the fair housing piece, what we're trying to share, and when you checked in, you saw a little flyer about your fair housing rights. What we want to make sure throughout this process and throughout all of our programs is that our residents are well aware of their fair housing rights. And so HUD has us do what's called an analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. So we want to make sure that everybody has the ability to choose where they live, the type of housing they live in, the neighborhood they live in, their roommate situation or their familial situation. You choose where you live and how you are situated in that house based on your needs and your desires, and not just because, well, that's the only thing I could find, or that's the only place that would approve me for a lease, right? We want to make sure that everybody actually has choice. So in this fair housing assessment, which is ongoing right now as well, we're doing a sort of an expanded look at the housing market and demographic analysis, and really with a focus on fair housing and housing opportunities and choices. So most all of us are familiar with fair housing rights and protected classes and different programs and the law, who the law protects, and these subclasses listed at the bottom here. What I think a lot of people don't understand is who is subject to or who has to comply with the Fair Housing Act. And so what we're looking at here is, okay, here's all the protected classes, and that's kind of easy to, everybody is really, generally speaking, aware of this and knows what their rights are around protected classes. But we don't know who has to actually abide by that. So we probably all would assume big, large apartment complexes, yeah, they're subject to it. Bankers or mortgage companies, they're subject to it. But where we often don't realize it is property managers of little, small individual property owners and managers, they're subject to the laws as well. Insurance companies are subject to the law, home insurance companies. HOAs or condo boards are also subject to. Neighborhood associations are subject to, right? And so a lot of people don't understand that they have rights. And I'll tell you just from experience in Mount Pleasant, HOA in my neighborhood has overstepped their rights and their bounds many times and has been called out on it. Overstepping what they can claim they have the authority to tell somebody to do with their property or not do with their property. You don't have those rights. There's certain things we sign up for when we buy into a neighborhood that's got a HOA, and we agree to that. But there's other things that they can't do prohibited by law. So we want to make sure throughout all of our programming that people understand what their rights are, who has to comply with these laws, and you'll see in the flyer, if you feel like your rights have been violated by any of these groups, how do you make a complaint or how do you seek assistance to address those issues? So we want to promote that throughout all of our efforts. So with that, I'll just kind of wrap up and hopefully get some feedback from you. But just to sort of reiterate, two things we're looking for here is feedback on what our needs or our priorities should be with our three grants, CDBG, Home, and HOPWA. Generally speaking, where should we put those funds? Is it housing? Is it programming and services? Is it facilities and infrastructure? Is it economic development? These are our sort of general categories. What are our priorities, or what should our priorities be moving forward for the next 5 years? Then our home program and our HOPWA program are really heavily weighted towards housing. So what are our major housing issues? And we do put a lot of CDBG money into housing as well. So where should we put those funds to help address the housing issues? And then finally, around fair housing, do you feel like you or your neighbors or your community, there's fair housing violations or issues that are prevalent? If so, we want to be aware of that. Perhaps fund programs to help address fair housing and fair housing counseling moving forward. So I'll leave it here and then ask if you have any questions or comments. But you can scan this QR code. I know we all got familiar with this during COVID. It's the only way you could get a menu was use a QR code. But this will take you right to the survey. If you prefer to do it in paper, just let us know and we can make sure to get you a paper copy. And this is posted on the city website. The city's been promoting this through social media. So please do help us share this with your neighbors and family members. And for those of you that might represent an organization, we have a stakeholder survey. So you might take it as an individual, respond to the resident survey, and you say that personally, and then you'll see when you take the stakeholder survey, that's more like your organization. This is what we see based on our clients or as an organization. So I know you represent sort of two, and we appreciate you taking it from both perspectives. And anybody else where that might be relevant, help us spread the word there. So with that, I'll stop. I'm happy to take questions, feedback. I won't put anybody on the spot, but happy to hear any feedback you might have.
Eric, I apologize, Tracy. I want to give Councilwoman Herbert to get up and provide any type of feedback or remarks. She is out
here where everybody say first.
Okay.
Because if I say something, then folks may not talk, and everyone in this room can talk.
Yes, ma'am. I heard them when they came in. They were loud when they came in.
We have some vocal folks in here, so I want to hear from them first too.
And let me before you share, we're taking your feedback and we're writing down summaries of the themes or the comments that's provided. You won't be cited personally as that so-and-so said this, right? We're going to summarize from each of these meetings the conversation that was had and the themes or the general feedback. Likewise, when you take the survey, we might ask you sort of what neighborhood or zip code you're living in, so we just kind of get an idea of the representation, but in no way is anybody going to be personally identified. So feel free to speak however you may, positive or negative, and know that we're it's not necessarily writing your name down and sending you a letter about it.
Can you back the slide up so we can see what the different options were?
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
Like here, or you want me to go early on in this presentation?
I mean, I don't know what she might want, but I just kind of wanted to see.
Forgive me, let me bump through the presentation. I'll go back to the eligible uses up front. So this is listing out the eligible uses of all three of our grants. And I'll share with you just again, CDBG is about $1 million, Home is about 700,000, and Hopwood is about 2 million. And the Hopwood, we have so limited, it's only used for certain eligible categories and certain clientele. So there's not a lot of flexibility under Hopwood, if you will. But CDBG and Home, we have pretty significant flexibility, and certainly CDBG is the most flexible and the most, granted, we only get $1 million there, but still it's the most flexible. So we're really looking for, on CDBG and Home, what should our priorities be, because we have options. With Hopwood, there's not a lot of options, so we have to do what the program is designed for.
So is your, those limits a hard set? Like you only get like $2 million?
Yeah, good question. So the city does not apply for these funds. As Felicia said in her introduction, the city is considered an entitlement community, has been for many decades now. So once we hit a certain population threshold, and we did that a long time ago, then we receive these funds as part of the federal budget. So what happens is Congress and the president sign a budget and put money in these grants at the federal level. So they might, I think CDBG last year was $2 billion, if you will, at the federal level. And then there's a formula that's in the long. So HUD just puts in the $2 million at the front, and then it says, here's how many grantees it goes to. And so what happens is there's a portion that goes to the states, then there's a portion that goes to cities and counties that are eligible. So for example, the state of South Carolina gets about $20 million in CDBG, but they serve all of the state that doesn't get this directly. And as I listed off the places that get it directly, but it's where you would assume. The major metros on the coast, here in the Midlands, and then up in the upstate, Greenville, Spartanburg area. So everything else, the state covers. So about 40% of all the funds go to states, and about 60% of the funds go to local jurisdictions. And I think in South Carolina, there's about 15 local jurisdictions that receive these funds directly. But there's nothing we can do other than continuing to grow population. There's nothing we can do to get more, and thankfully there's nothing that we do to get less either, right? But as more people move from New Jersey down here and Ohio down here, we're getting more money and they're getting a little less because it's largely based on population.
And income.
And income. And I wouldn't say that the poverty level being high is a good thing, but that is part of the formula for CDBG. So that population lower incomes, high poverty, as part of the formula that's generating our funds. So I suppose if we really, if poverty was cut in half in the next decade, yeah, we get a little less because we've improved the situation. But
Correct.
generally speaking, the largest factor is just formula. But again, simply put, we can't get more, we don't get less. There's no ability there.
So on a, community development level, I mean, I'm loving the home program, but it's clearly not enough of the needs that we have. It's, I mean, it helped a lot of people, myself too, but it's just, all that the people need, it's not enough. Needless to say, great
It's a
start.
drop in the bucket.
It really is. But the other one, what does a forgivable down payment loan, what does that fall under?
One second, I need you to talk about what you think we should be doing.
I'm getting ready to do that. So I'm saying, what does forgivable, because in making our community better, what I'm focusing on is bring in new families to buy the homes that are available.
Sure.
So-
So the city gets a lot of flexibility in the CDBG program specifically on how we provide housing assistance.
So what I'm saying is, my suggestion is a forgivable down payment.
So
Then people.
you have, the city has
That's
that.
amount, but I don't know if it's forgivable. I heard 500 and I've heard of other amounts, I haven't heard of complete forgivable.
So I have for at least a decade now, commended the city for many, as long as I've ever known and worked with the city on CDBG and home. Most of the funds you put out for individual assistance, whether it's rehab or purchase assistance or developers building stuff, has been repayable. And you are generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue on top of these programs each year because it was set up that way many decades ago. So where Spartanburg, for example, gives all forgivable, well, they got 700,000 in home in Spartanburg too, roughly. And when they serve 6-8 houses, they're done for the year. You guys, in a lot of cases, I won't say you're doubling it, but you're significantly increasing your pool by making it payable. And so what we're doing is you're not getting a 6% mortgage like you would get from, I think Truist is next door, right? I mean, you're getting a better rate than there,
Okay.
but it's not free. And now, let's be clear, the city has that authority to make them forgivable. And with CDBG, you can literally just give a grant and be done. But Foresight, many years ago, said, let's make this payable, even if it's a tiny amount a month.
Yeah, not that you said that.
But it generates so much to help more families.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Forgivable,
Yes.
totally. Yeah,
I
and
mean,
that-
because like you said, when people are in apartments, they have a very hard time saving for down payment.
sure.
And I have several friends that are in apartments, and like you said, it's just really hard to save when you're paying so much rent. So I think that'd be a great, even though $500 and things like that.
And we are very limited on our ability to fund rental assistance for these programs.
Right, and so I think.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. We do a lot of rental assistance with HOPWA, because that's kind of the way that program is designed. But on the other two programs, we're really supporting the development or the renovation of housing from the physical aspect rather than the, if you will, the operational standpoint, because we just 700,000 in home ain't gonna pay a lot of rent.
So that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that they're paying so much in rent that they just can't save
Right.
for the down payment.
And so, if I may, Tien, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know you guys are receiving funds to develop some rental housing for sale, but so single family houses. So can you describe those just briefly and how much it costs even you guys as a nonprofit based right here in the community trying to do good work here, but what's it cost you guys to build those units?
So there'll be, about 250,
And describe that house, like how big is it?
3 bedrooms, 2 baths,
1,000 square feet, 1,500 square feet?
13 to 1,500.
Yeah, so I mean, you're not building mansions.
So that's why I was gonna say, I found it interesting that you said, and did you get that information from a survey, that families are now looking for 2 bedroom for because, you know, now the dynamics of the family has
Right,
changed.
right.
So you don't find the larger families, but when we go into the neighborhood, which we do initially, they don't want the small houses. The
Yeah.
first thing they say is, don't put the little houses on no lots.
Right.
So it's kind of difficult, and so you do go for the same style, same size home that is already there.
Right.
Because that is what the
Yeah.
neighborhood wants to see.
Right, and we have, across the country, I do this stuff all over the country. Across the country, we have a lack of affordable housing for seniors, or a lack of housing options for seniors. So in a lot of places, and Columbia is definitely one of these, where I am in the Low Country in Charleston and Mount Pleasant area, is a big issue as well. There's no place for seniors to go when they want to leave that house that they've had. So grandma's got a 4-bedroom house, 2 stories. She's done cleaning that house, but it's been paid for a long time. And that's not her main desire. She don't want to stay in that house, but it's free at that point. I mean, taxes and utilities, fine. But because of the price, she's staying in that house. And she goes, well, I can sell it for $200,000, but that's only going to give me 2 years at the retirement home or the senior apartment, and then what I'm going to do for the next 10 years. So that's a prime example of a lack of choice because of the financial condition. You don't have affordable senior, and the point I'm making there is we've got people, single individuals that are living in large homes that don't want to live in that home, but they ain't got a place to go. If they had a place to go, that would free up some of the larger homes to households that want that house. So we definitely need all types. It's not to say we don't need bigger houses, but we might already have that stock. We don't have the other things so the people that don't want the 4-bedroom house or the 2-story house or the big yard. Grandma's tired of cutting grass or not getting the grass cut. So she wants something better, but it's not financially feasible. Now, look, some people want to stay in that house forever and die in the house they own. You should have that choice too if that fits you. Sir?
I was gonna say, some of the houses that were built on Reed Street, and then some of the houses over the back here on Monticello Road, is that, in terms of senior housing, I mean, the smaller units really help seniors live longer and live healthier. But the problem is, when I drive out into Richmond County, they build all these cardboard houses. That's what they look. They're all grey. They all look like they're made of cardboard, and they're all large, and we're not taking advantage of the knowledge that we have in terms of what families look like to actually build in a way that would create healthier communities. And so
Our active buyers are growing families, but when we want another option, if it doesn't exist in the market, nobody knows that nobody's out there inventorying or polling grandmas to say, how many of you want to live in St. But it's clearly they're there.
Right.
But yeah, we don't have that. We know that sort of anecdotally, but we don't have, it's hard to get market data on how many seniors would rather be in a smaller house than they're in. And then it becomes difficult to fund somebody to go build these because, well, what if nobody wants it? So where do they have their biggest profit? On the big stuff. And so that's where big developers are, building the big stuff, because that's the biggest return on their investment.
But you're starting to be in competition with these companies who are coming in. If I want to sell my house,
Oh, yeah.
then you got these people who are calling you, I want to buy your house.
Yep.
And it's not making homes available for people, just families who want to buy homes. Because these companies are buying up homes, turning them into Airbnbs or
That's a
whatever.
huge problem where
And
I am
that's
on
a
the coast.
huge problem.
Huge problem. Yeah.
So I can't go buy my first, back then when I was buying a home, your starter home,
Yeah.
because I'm in competition with
Yeah.
big business.
in community development world, we have this term called drive till you qualify. And I grew up in Atlanta, and this is how I got into community development. This is more than you care to know, but I'm gonna tell you anyway. I got into community development. I grew up in Metro Atlanta, and when I wanted to be a first-time home buyer and buy my starter home, if you will, like, well, it ain't gonna be in Atlanta. It ain't gonna be 10 miles out of Atlanta. That'll be 20 miles. I had to drive way out into the country to find a house that I could qualify for the mortgage for. Well, what did that make me do? Then that made me commute an hour each way back and forth as a high school teacher back in the day. So I had to drive way out and then add to the impact on infrastructure and traffic, etc. Why? Because there wasn't a housing opportunity for where I was. So I had to drive 45 miles out of town to go find something that I could afford. Or get a couple roommates and stay in an apartment, which we all grow out of that eventually.
Yeah, I'm just, I don't really know how to put in, where to start at, because this is my home, Columbia, from here, or I left. And Columbia is what's so, it's scale square, otherwise, the area is so big. And we have so many colleges and universities. And I see more student housing than anything. And the competition between student housing and then you've got, because you can get a lot. The house I bought was at one time USC students lived in it. And the homeowner just got tired, of them tearing his house. So we decided to sell them and get with it. But just,
And that's a huge problem downtown Charleston too. We don't have any more land in downtown Charleston. And if the students are occupying all the building, and the main issue that student housing is as a housing market analyst, we look at that heavily. All those students are getting student loans. So they're not paying for it now. They're gonna pay for the housing today. They're gonna pay for it in 20 years, which really throws off the market. They're getting cheap student loans that they get to kick down the road for years, and they don't really absorb that cost. And then if they split it 4 ways, because they're willing to just have a bedroom, now the 4 of them are willing to pay $3,500 for a house. Well, who's not gonna rent it at $3,500 when it used to be for $1,000? That's why it gets out of hand real quick. That's what's happened in Charleston. Everybody's carving up their house downtown for either Airbnb
They're doing apartments like that too.
or student housing.
No, they're doing apartments like that too.
Yeah, and they're doing apartments like that. There's a bunch of complexes. I'm not familiar with them right here, but in downtown Charleston, there's a bunch of apartments that are being built specifically for students where it's a 4-bedroom type situation. And the landlords are willing to have 4 leases, but it's really just still 1 apartment. And then they get bills that way. So I definitely understand that the student housing impact, the Airbnb impact on the market is really quite difficult.
Well, it ain't necessarily the market, it's the neighborhood.
No, these funds cannot be used for student housing.
right. And so, this is a college town.
But student housing, those developers are making money hand over fist.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
They are making money hand over fist on those students.
So,
Because the federal government, federal government is subsidizing that. They're the problem. If they quit giving out student loans for so cheap, and then this would go away.
That's finna come.
So, here we are.
That's finna come.
Trying to me, majority of the money should go, even though I know you got community development, is for home partnership for the senior citizens who, to me, that's just a issue in my heart. Senior
Absolutely.
citizens that have children or don't have children.
Priced out and pushed out.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
You're gonna always have student housing. It's gonna be nice, it's gonna be younger population, and like you said, those that can will drive until, and they will drive in. A friend today got stuck in traffic. Like, where did all these people come from? I'm like, well, they live in the city. They work in the city, but they live out in the
You got people
north.
coming from Orangeburg, you got people coming from Newberry, you got people coming from Sumter, you got people coming from all over to get to Columbia for work every day. Some of them want to live in Orangeburg and have a farm and be out in the woods, fine, then let them do that. But some of them are there because that's all they can afford to get. Yeah, not because they really wanna be there. They'd rather be right here by their work and
They're
where all these
getting,
amenities.
eventually they're gonna get pushed out too.
Just further and further.
Yeah.
So I mean, the home and just clean up the city. Spend money on home repairs and just make it nice and clean, that is that.
It's certainly one way to address it. Again, the city has a pretty robust rehab program, but help seniors can maintain their home so that they can stay in the home. For a lot of us, that's, unfortunately, that is the best option for affordable housing, is just stay put, but modify the house so it's safe for you to live in. That we don't want seniors to have to go up and down stairs and be in an old house, drafty house that hasn't been repaired, but sometimes it does, the financials of it is just, makes it, so we have to help them rehab it, make it safe.
So what's an example of your public improvements?
Well, like this community center could be improved, parks, libraries, senior centers, playgrounds, sidewalk improvements, crosswalk improvements. So public improvements is really quite flexible. But yeah, parks, libraries, community centers, those are sort of the big ones.
In your public services?
Public services is typically, correct me if I'm wrong, staff, but typically we partner with nonprofits that are offering some sort of social service program in low-income neighborhoods. So that might be, I think there's a program that's being funded for mental health counseling, for financial literacy. There's a program that helps seniors, sort of with technology and, learning those types of skills and how to use the technology and that sort of stuff. Fair housing counseling is always one that is a fan. Homeless, sort of outreach programs, helping individuals or families that are about to become homeless or are homeless get connected. Yeah, and ideally prevent them from becoming homeless. So there's a lot of nonprofits in the Midlands that get funds directly from HUD to address homelessness, and so that money doesn't, come through Columbia, so we don't necessarily have authority to make decisions on how they use it, but certainly we can help people get connected to those services. So, sort of referral services and connection services is important for us to fund for our residents to connect them to other programs and service providers.
Well, how do people find out, affordable housing? How do they find out that they have these type of funding available to them? Because I don't
I'll let you
ever
address
see.
that.
Sure, yeah, you can have them reach out to really community development. And we have our housing loan program, and we've been having it for years. Now, in terms of our rehabilitation program, we do run that on a periodic basis. It's not open all the time, every year, throughout the entire year. We open up in season, so to speak. Right now, we're going through applications that we have already accepted and try to complete those projects now. We hope to open it up back again, hopefully next year, springtime, but we also have to see how far we came along in closing and finishing the projects that we're still going through from the previous applications. But again,
What kind of
it is a
advertisement do
program
y'all
that's
do?
constant run.
What kind of advertisement do y'all do? Cause I don't never hear nothing about it.
So a lot of times we'll reach out, we'll open it up, we'll contact our neighborhood leaders to let them know that we have launched the rehabilitation program. We'll put it on the website. We very rare put it out on the news or radio station because most times we don't open it up citywide. We try to open it up in our target communities and focus in providing those dollars in our targeted areas is what we've done. I will mention this, we did open it up citywide last time and we got 115 applications. And
115?
115, it was pretty massive, and so it was way beyond that what we can help. We didn't have enough funds to cover all 115 applications, so we had to scale it back tremendously and look at the homes that was really targeted in our targeted areas.
So how many applications could y'all provide for?
We generally like to receive about 30.
Well, you like to fund about that many.
Yeah, we like to
right?
fund about
Yeah,
30 applications.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A year.
Will the target areas change with this process?
Well, we are in discussion now, in reference to our target communities and see, what the final decision
on the other page when it said economic development, that's been very helpful in small businesses.
Yeah, so there's sort of two lines of effort that you can do under economic development. One is to help low-income individuals that, what HUD uses the term micro enterprise, so real small businesses, 5 or fewer employees, where the owners themselves might be low to moderate income, and so they're trying to start their own business to support their family. So you can give them essentially like seed money to help them expand or get that business started. So on one hand, helping small businesses, low-income owners, get their own program started. The other side is provide funding to well-established large businesses that will then create employment opportunities. So in some cases, and in those cases, those would be offered as loans that the business would pay back. So a really good example, I don't know if you've been to the city of Spartanburg in a while, but there's a Marriott hotel downtown Spartanburg that has a convention center, a conference center in downtown. City of Spartanburg, like 15 years ago, gave the Marriott developer several $1 million of CDBG funds as a loan. They built that conference center and now it employs hundreds of people. And then they repaid that loan with interest. So that was a win-win for the city. Now they've got a hotel that's generating taxes and revenue for not only for the business but for the city, and it has significant employment because of people working at the hotel, working at the conference center, and all that might entail. And then naturally, other restaurants and retail type stuff have developed over the last decade around that. So it's not to say that they really just stimulated it, but that was the idea there. So yeah, they don't necessarily need that loan. They have access to other capital, but if done strategically, that can be really helpful. Another way that you do economic development, I'll give you another good example here in South Carolina. In Charleston, if you've been to downtown Charleston in the last decade, the hot area that everybody goes to now is on King Street, and they call it Upper King. It's where all the new restaurants, all the new hotels, all the new bars that are out, and everybody that's flocking to Charleston to go for partying, they're all on Upper King. When I was in grad school 20 years ago in College Charleston, Upper King was abandoned, blighted. Mayor Riley used CDBG funds to improve the facades of all those old buildings, plant some palm trees, put some gas lights, redo the sidewalks, and then provide loans to businesses to occupy that. And that worked. 20 years later, it is the hot spot, and people are paying $500 a night for a hotel room in that same area that you wouldn't have walked down 20 years ago. And that was a CDBG sort of, if you will, seed to get that that business district revitalized. So that's options for economic development. Loans to low-income small businesses, loans to big businesses that'll stimulate jobs, and other improvements that will help make economic activity more reasonable, right? I mean, no individual business owner would have taken on that effort on King Street to be able to revitalize. I mean, I fixed one building, but the 3 next to me are ugly. Nobody's coming to my shop. So they had to make a targeted area to revitalize all of it now under economic development, and it worked.
Couple of things. We have a lot of homeless people with disabilities that we don't seem to be able to service. And these folks have income, but they don't have access. And so I think, that's an area that needs to be looked into. I was at a HIV/AIDS conference, a day thing over at Brooklyn Baptist Church, and the lead speaker there, and I don't know that we can actually do anything about it, says that your health outcomes now with HIV and AIDS are significantly better than somebody suffering from diabetes. So there's changes happening in terms of health outcomes that, potentially lead.
That's a big statement, isn't it? I mean, I'm not questioning you, but I mean, that's,
No, this was.
that's good on one side, but probably
This
not.
is the guy, the infectious diseases guy down at, the Bristol Hospital.
Yeah.
Has been doing this stuff for years, so.
Yeah.
In terms of priorities, and in terms, as I say, it's, if we want to, resolve some of the other issues downtown with regards to, to homelessness, I think, potentially, that's a duty and a responsibility that we do have to our community, that we can't, it's not a pull up bootstraps and, these are, lifelong chronic conditions that people are facing, but we really do need to try and address more resources too.
And I can kind of piggyback that, because we have a transitional, property. We also do property management as well. We have senior property, but we have a transitional from home to housing. But there's a link missing in there, because they go from. Before we. But they go from this strictness from housing, they, in this place where they're taught how to live, but we're not assisted living. So now they come to us where we're not assisted living, and now it's this mind frame back to homelessness, but they're on their own, because they don't have that.
Supportive services. I mean, that's what the term HUD uses, supportive services, yeah.
And we're also a nonprofit. So.
And fair, there's a bit of give and take with that. I totally agree with you. The HUD programs, because of fair housing laws, we can have that transitional housing, but we can't force somebody to participate in that health counseling, substance abuse counseling. We can't force them, and so unless they want to, that the transitional housing might be a temporary solution, and we can't force them to have mental health counseling. I wish we could. In some cases, we just need to force people, but fair housing rights prohibit that. Now, I do want to point out for you, just because you mentioned that transitional housing. State Housing announced today $42 million available in a special program, a one-time program called the Home ARP, or American Rescue Plan funds. But that money is specifically for households at risk or formerly homeless, 30% AMI households, transitional housing, and funding for supportive services is in that money. So $42 million, we have a workshop next week. Well, that's state housing. Yes, state housing is here in Columbia. They're over on Bush River Road, but that's for the whole state. So it's not, I wish that was $42 million for Columbia, but that's for the whole state. And so nonprofits, for-profits, local government is eligible to apply to state housing finance. They got the largest cut of that. The city got that same grant, but it was only what, like $1 million?
Yeah,
A little over $1 million. So the state has $42 million. And they just announced that literally today. So I would encourage you to check, if that's something y'all are trying to expand, definitely check it out.
Just a quick ask. So state housing didn't fund anything in Richmond County this go around?
Tax credits.
Yeah. Can y'all?
Or it's LIHTC,
Yeah.
because that's state housing, and so they have funded.
You say they didn't?
They have funded.
So may I speak to you?
For this year? I got the list. It has nothing in Richmond County. For this year? Have y'all?
Not surprising. They got, and they got two in Sumter.
The villages
So-
you know to read, that's it.
The whole section down there on Adams Road. Have you seen it on the list? Okay.
So new funded, LIHTC field funded in this cycle.
In this cycle?
In this cycle,
Yeah.
they just got approved for the one
Yeah,
before.
the one that just got approved.
Okay, this cycle here, like this, like
Right,
the past
it's a
couple of
list,
months or
so,
so.
yeah, a list just came out.
Okay, so I'm not certain of that.
Right.
I can find it.
They haven't
That being
updated
said-
this year.
Yeah, I
since I'm in South Carolina.
Yeah. Is it?
Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Columbia, Greenville, and Spartanburg
Yeah.
should get a deal every year without question, period. And maybe Rock Hill, the cities,
Oh, okay.
the urban areas. From my opinion, I don't care where it goes, but Charleston Metro gets one, Myrtle Beach Metro, Columbia Metro, Greenville, Spartanburg, and somewhere around Rock Hill, probably need that. There should be a set aside for those communities, and you should just get a deal every year. So in Florida, they've done that. Now, granted, Florida gets a whole lot more in the allocation than low-income tax credit, but Jacksonville gets a deal every year. That Jacksonville gets the pick. The city picks it. Then they tell the state, this is the deal we want you to fund. Tampa gets one. Miami gets one. Tallahassee gets one. Orlando gets one. Every year, and the city picks it. And the city tells state housing, this is the one we're supporting. Go fund it. And so that's what we need in South Carolina. That's, yeah, because they just set up the QAP. I can find that real quick, but I'll double check. But that should be a standard that we get a deal every year. But you know who's gonna have to do that? That's why I was speaking to you. It's the elected officials who got but we need people to call the governor's office because he appoints the board for the state housing and force them to change the QAP instead of the people that keep doing it. And that's me as a resident of South Carolina, not me as a consultant for Columbia. Sorry.
When I was growing up, everybody knew to come to Columbia. Columbia had everything. And now it's totally backwards.
It is.
Most all of
It's
it in
like
Lexington.
being punished.
Most everything in Lexington, I'm moving to Lexington.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
I really am serious with that water line. I ain't gonna go no further than that. For those that remember.
So on the screen, I'm not cutting anybody off. You're welcome to continue this conversation, but it's while you're thinking on the screen, I'm sort of showing you the next steps. So we've got another meeting tomorrow night. 2 more, is it next week or the week after? We got 4 of these community evening meetings, 1 stakeholder meeting. The surveys are open for at least a couple, at least the end of the year, if not, end of January. So we're developing all that data collection and getting feedback from stakeholders and residents, et cetera, and putting all that together. And then in February timeframe, we'll start drafting the priorities, putting the plan together. Somewhere around March or April, the plan will be posted for public comment. And of course, you found it on, the city's information, so that'll be made available for comment. And again, in the spring, we have to wait till Congress passes the budget and HUD tells us how much money we're going to get before we can publish that plan. So to some extent, we're kind of waiting on the numbers, but ideally, by the time we get there in the spring, we've got these identified, we'll have the number and we'll be able to publish. But then you'll have opportunity at that point to come back and say, did we listen and set it up the way?
So I think the annual action plan we will have access to?
Yeah, the annual action plan will be part of the consolidated plan. Yeah. So that 5-year plan includes the first year action plan.
So we'll get an email or something? Or we have to put this in our calendar?
Well, it's not going to be a precise date that we publish because again, we're waiting on the allocations. But yes, we'll blast it social media, the emails.
Send information out to our neighborhood leaders.
And, oh yeah. It's supposed to be pretty mobile friendly. You should be able to answer it pretty easily.
Well, I found it, so that's right, that's one that, step 1, I found it, so. That's good.
All right, any other questions or comments? I thank you all for coming, first and foremost, but thank you for your conversation. I attend a lot of these meetings that I don't have anybody or nobody says a word, so thank you for the conversation. No, I was telling Felicia, I remember 5 years ago when I was in this room, we were pretty packed in too. So, you guys get pretty good representation over here in this part of town. So thank you all. I'll turn it back to Felicia if you got anything else.
Our meeting would be at the Melrose Park Community Center,
That's District 3.
District 3.
we'll have the next one on Monday, which is gonna be at the, Hampton Park. Community Center over there. And then our very last one, it's gonna be December the 12th, it's gonna be at Charles Drew Wellness.
So, quick question, if you all are doing one in every district, which I commend you all on doing, are people supposed to just go to the one in their district, or they
They
can
can
go
come to others, yeah, they can certainly come to
So
others,
they-
it's open to the public.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I think we probably, I need to make sure that's clear, because a lot of folks didn't get the notice that this one.
It'll certainly be the same presentation. I'm doing it tomorrow night. Different staff on my team are doing the other two. But of course, they're gonna present it a little differently, and then the conversation maybe, could be totally different. So, yeah, we'll all be presenting this data or this presentation, but then, where the conversation could certainly be different. So you're welcome to attend all of them, but I'm not saying anything different.
And so we're pushing the survey, you're gonna pull it from
Yeah,
there?
please. Yeah.
The brochure,
Tomorrow, at Melrose,
And time?
6 to 8,
excuse me,
and then
Yes, sir.
Monday,
the brochure,
it's gonna be at Hampton Park.
I'm sorry?
the brochure that y'all have out,
Same time,
The fair housing?
6 to 8.
yeah, y'all need to make that a little easy to read.
Bro, tell me, I can't read it either.
Yeah, 'cause that,
The black on blue don't work,
that
does
don't
it?
work.
Yeah.
You know, if it's light blue, and it don't work with the gray too well either.
Yeah. Honestly, it just needs to strip color out of it, just make it black and white. I mean, that's the easiest thing to read. It's not the prettiest, but it's the easiest thing to read. I'll tell them.
Cause you kinda have to squint to.
Yeah, I noticed that right away. I opened it up, it's like, I can't